My name is Jamie Gillespie, as you probably know, as you were coming in for this session. I previously worked for APNIC, recently left APNIC, here presenting as an independent person. These material I actually created while I was at APNIC, and all of these slides are released as Creative Commons. So full credit goes to APNIC that I used to work for when they were creating this material. You want to push the picture up? Yep. Maybe top right. Yeah. So the email security, what we're going to be looking at here is 4 different sections. Additionally, these slides will be made available. They will go up into the agenda as a PDF that you can download. So you'll have full access to these slides, but you can take pictures as well. So we're going to go through, we're going to first off look at what the email threats are that we're looking at specific to this area. We're going to look at a bit of phishing and social engineering and some of the vulnerabilities that they exploit. We're going to have a look at some email header analysis, very briefly, and then best practices for email security. This is, of course, email security from the email server side of things. So starting off with email threats here. So first one, and this is a really big one, is of course phishing. Phishing is a very large threat for a lot of people. A lot of organizations are falling prey to this. When we talk about phishing, it's not just your traditional phishing, but also business email compromise, because so much of business email compromise uses the same attack methods as phishing. Phishing is, of course, a play on words where you're luring in victims. And it's using deceptive emails. These deceptive emails can get people to open attachments, click on links, or even reply with sensitive or personal information. A lot of the phishing is done through spoofing or forging of the sender's email address to make it appear to be coming from an authoritative email address. This, of course, is done through spoofing domains and is commonly done if it's missing email protections such as SPF, DMARC, and DKIM. For example, those ones actually will prevent the spoofing of domains. The other way that it can actually happen for phishing is where people register a lookalike domain. Lookalike domains are where they modify some of the letters so that if people look at it briefly, they'll see the correct domain name. The example here, we have apnic.net in bold. This is the real domain name. But here we have apnlc.net. It's a different domain name, but when you look at it briefly, it sort of looks like an I or a capital I, which can confuse people. Other lookalikes, you can register with a different top-level domain. apnic is usually .net, but you could register .top. Other examples is where you have what looks like apnic.net, but then it continues on. So this actually isn't the domain. This is more subdomains and hosts. The actual domain is secure.email. But a lot of non-technical people will read the beginning of a host name, domain name, and go, oh, it's apnic.net, not knowing that the end of the domain name is the authoritative part for it. apniic.net is another one, doubling letters, transposing letters back and forth, putting in hyphens, ap-nic, still apnic, apnc, apnec, apnic with a C on the end. All of these are real lookalike domains that have been created for other companies. apnic doesn't get targeted quite this badly, but these are things that actually do happen. Other common threats is, of course, malware. This can be combined with the phishing so that people are enticed to open an attachment that has come through by email or to click a link and then download the malware. Malicious software, of course, these are traditionally viruses that then are infecting the computer and running with the permissions as the user. Now, this is dangerous because a lot of people run their computers with administrator privileges. We can't attack that from this side. We're looking at email threats here, but we have to understand that people do run as administrators sometimes. And of course, we're dealing with traditional spam. Spam doesn't have to be relating to phishing. It can just be random spam that comes in via email, sometimes spoofing domain names as well, but it's commercial in nature rather than trying to fool someone to give up personal information. Other email threats that we have are extortion and sextortion scams. This is where people send an email claiming to have access to your computer. Some of them claim to have access to your webcam and have turned on your webcam while you were getting undressed, and they have a video of you doing rude things and they'll give that away. So yeah, these are usually completely fake, but a lot of them, what they do is they spoof the email address to be coming from your own email. And what they say is, I've hacked your email. Look, this email comes from your email address and to your address. And for the average non-technical person, they'll look at that and say, hey, maybe my email is hacked. Maybe they have come through and actually got access to my camera. But this is a real screenshot. This is absolutely real. Some of them are much longer, but this is one of the shorter examples that we have here. Email account compromise. This is a different threat that we have with email where the attackers will actually go after your email account itself. So if you're using Google and Gmail, for example, they will try and break into your Google account to directly access your Gmail account. From there, they can do any number of things. They can, of course, send email as you, and email coming from a legitimate account probably won't get flagged by many systems, but they can also then get access to everything in your email, in your inbox, your saved folders. They can search for passwords. They can search for sensitive information, files that you've been exchanging. And of course, they can set up backdoors to maintain access to your email even after you change passwords and enable two-factor authentication. This is commonly done by setting up POP or IMAP access. If anybody remembers POP and IMAP, not commonly used with Gmail, but it allows for you to access your Gmail from another computer. The POP and IMAP access is totally separate to your username, password, and two-factor authentication. This applies for Google, Microsoft, and any of the other webmail providers that also have POP IMAP access. And of course, business email compromise. I was alluding to this one before as part of phishing. It's very similar, but what we're doing is we're targeting employees at a business, and we're usually trying to have an impact that is much larger than for an individual person. So for example, we may have a person that is pretending to be a CEO and saying, hey, I'm in a big client meeting right now. I need to give them some gift cards as goodwill so that we can get this new corporate deal or this new sales deal. Can you go buy $2,000 worth of gift cards and send me the gift card pictures so that I can give it to the client? Very common. People do fall for this. And it's quite a shame because it usually comes out of the individual person's credit card. Another one that's bigger on the business side, accounts receivable at an organization get a fake invoice. It looks like a real vendor's invoice. It may even have all the correct information except the bank details. Where the payment is supposed to go to goes off to the criminal attacker's bank account rather than the real company. So that's a common one there. Also, another one is HR, human resources, receiving email spoofed to be pretending from an employee saying, hey, my bank account details have changed. I need you to put my salary into this new bank account. So that's yet another one that can happen from there. The examples I've given are relatively small, but when they're repeated again and again, it can actually turn into be something quite large. This one here, for example, this vendor invoice, tens of millions of dollars have been lost from Silicon Valley companies because of that exact scam. And they kept doing it. Once they did it once and they got money, they're like, we can just do this again and again, just different invoices appearing to be real companies, but with different bank account details going off to it. And of course, business email compromise encompasses another part as well, where they actually compromise the business computer to gain access to the email account. So again, if you have somebody working in finance that has access to payment systems, if their computer gets a virus on it and allows the criminal to do remote control, they can then watch everything that they're doing, have access, and then perform the same transactions, stealing login tokens, gaining access to payment systems, and sending money as if it was the actual finance person doing it themselves. So business email compromise is several different aspects of things, but we're looking at big impact because it's no longer just a personal home user. We're dealing with large businesses and large money. Examples of business email compromise. This is a very real email. Duncan McIntosh used to be the CEO of the APAN Foundation. As CEO, he has a LinkedIn profile that said CEO of APAN Foundation. So instantly, criminals were looking at that and going, hey, he's the CEO. Let's find somebody else who works at that company. We'll pretend to be the CEO. We'll send an email to this other person and get them to do something for us. So obviously, Blondine cousin works at APNIC as well. So Duncan, who actually is not really Duncan, is sending Blondine an email saying, Blondine, are you at your desk? I will be going into a meeting with limited phone calls. How close are you to a store? I have a task for you to handle. Keep an eye on your email. Thanks. What do you think this criminal is going to ask Blondine to do in the next email? Purchasing gift cards. It's a very classic one. Limited phone calls in a meeting close to a store to go out and buy gift cards. So this was a real one. Now, the thing is, you look at this and you would go, absolutely, tampabay.rr.com, that's not APNIC. But a lot of email programs, when you're reading your email, don't display the email address. They just display the name, and you have to hover over or click on it to view it. So if we weren't looking at the email address, all you would see is email from Duncan to Blondine. This is another example. If you could just move the video to the, yeah, perfect. This is another example here. From Duncan to Sylvia. Again, targeting Duncan because he's the CEO, so pretending to be him. Sylvia works for Duncan at this time. And as you can see, this is an actual screenshot from Sylvia's mobile phone. It doesn't show the email addresses. It just says, I'm planning a surprise for some of the staff with gifts. Need you to get a purchase done. You know, that's it. How do you know that that's not Duncan? You have to actually click on it. And of course, when you do click on it, you see that it's CEO Office 15 at AOL.com. Again, not exactly an APNIC email address, is it? So that's how business email compromise starts. That's how the gift card scam starts. And these are real screenshots. I haven't made any of this stuff up. Interpol, of course, has caught on that this is a very big problem internationally for law enforcement. So they've put together a little infographic sort of thing. We talked about illegal access, where they actually compromise the username and password of the computer or email. They use social engineering to get information. And of course, the ones that we just saw was the urgent request. I'm going into a meeting. I need you to do something now for me. So social engineering, sense of urgency, and separate to that sometimes is actually compromising the computer or email. These are some examples of losses due to BEC. I was telling you about the tens of millions of dollars. That one I was thinking of is actually not on this list for some reason. There it is. It's on the next list. So here we have Ubiquity Networks. Who here has heard of Ubiquity? You know, the Wi-Fi networking people. Ubiquity Networks lost $39 million to CEO fraud in 2015. Ooh, we have a window. Oh, there it goes. Toyota parts supplier. Twitter was compromised as well. Twitter actually got credential stealing that was done. So they weren't going after money, but they were accessing usernames and passwords. Here's the other one for Silicon Valley. Fake invoices to Google and Facebook. We're not talking about small companies. We're not talking about companies that don't have procedures. We're talking about two letters out of the FANG companies for Silicon Valley. $120 million over 3 years. That's incredible. Huge money. And of course, the ones that I had up there before, FBI is saying that for the 11-year period from 2013 to 2024, that the losses were from 158,000 US victims and a total of $20 billion US. For Verizon's data breach investigation report, the median loss for business email compromise is $50,000. And in 2020, 95 of losses were between 250 all the way up to $1 million. In Australia, the Australian Cyber Security Centre, as part of the government organization, is receiving BEC reports of $80 million, averaging 39,000 per incident, 39,000 Australian dollars. So that's closer to 25,000 US dollars. So still considerable for each event as it happens. So phishing on its own can be broken down into a few different things. Some of this is fairly well known, so I'll go through it a little bit quickly. Of course, we have spear phishing. So traditional phishing is where they would just send out a phishing email, maybe clicking on a link or, buying spam items or whatever. They'd send it to a lot of people that may not even be in the right country. Spear phishing is where they target it a little bit more. Spear phishing can go after individual people, and it personalizes the phishing email by using your name or other information. There's personal spear phishing, where what they do is they use data breaches from the past, not just to use your name, but also your home address. If you've ever seen that a company has been hacked and a data breach, and it included your name, date of birth, and home address and phone number, criminals can use that to personalize spear phishing to make it look like they really know you. But in reality, they're just going through a large database, pulling information, and doing a mail merge, essentially. Whaling. Whaling is basically spear phishing, but going after the big fish. Yes, I know whales aren't fish, but whaling fish, it's an analogy. Whaling has been commonly used in gambling institutions, like in Las Vegas, where they say that the big spenders are the whales because they've got a lot of money. They're the big players. Here, spear phishing whaling is where it's targeting senior executives. Vishing, not that I approve of all of these names, but vishing is voicemail phishing. What we have here is we're leaving phone calls and leaving voicemails, tricking people to hand over passwords, to call them back, pretending to be the credit card company that needs to verify your identity, any number of things like that. Sometimes they also direct the victim to go to a malicious website, and sometimes they direct them to install a remote access Trojan on their computer. Smishing is SMS phishing. So what we have here are examples where these are sent by SMS, text message to your mobile phone. It's basically like phishing, but the thing is, it's a lot harder to copy and paste URLs. Mobile phones make it really easy to just click on a link. But if I want to copy that link, it's very difficult. In most mobile phones, if I try and copy this link, it copies the entire text. So trying to copy and paste and verify through independent websites can be quite difficult. We also have companies, like legitimate companies, where they shorten their URL and you can't even tell if it's the real company or not. But the real company is shortening your URL in an unexpected way. So here's some smishing ones. Did you request a password reset? Delete your message if you did. Otherwise, send cancel and a verification code will be sent to you. And of course, what they do is they've got your username and password and they're trying to get your two-factor code. So you reply cancel, they try your username and password from a data breach. It sends you a 6-digit two-factor code. You reply back to them with that code and boom, they've compromised your account, even though you had two-factor authentication enabled. Packages stopped, packages needing customs being paid, packages without addresses. Those are very common smishing ones here as well. You can see this one is from Australia Post. National Australia Bank. This is Australia, even though it doesn't really say Australia. Remember the URLs that I was talking about before? Here you see nab.com.au, and a lot of people would stop and go, that's real, but then it's .nab-professional.com. So it's not the real domain name, but it's hard to see that on just a text message. So recognizing phishing, it's always going to give you that sense of urgency. A package isn't being delivered. Your account is currently being hacked into. I'm your boss. I need you to do something for me right away. That sense of urgency changes from your rational thinking brain to your very short, fast working brain, where you're responding, you're wanting to do the thing quickly rather than thinking about it and going, hang on, why would my boss be asking me to do that? So the sense of urgency is always a big one. If there's ever a sense of urgency, that's a clue where you have to teach yourselves, your family, and your colleagues to stop and maybe get a second opinion against it. Because it might be very personal to you, whereas someone next to you might look at it and go, yeah, no, that's garbage. That's a scam. That's phishing. That's someone trying to do something illegal. We also have message style. Phishing messages may sound the same, may not sound the same when coming from a legitimate sender. When we go back to those emails from Duncan, the CEO of APAN Foundation at the time, that was not his way of writing. That was not his way of signing off and putting his name at the end. It was very different to him how he normally would speak. This, you may have work colleagues that they're normally very formal, and suddenly they sent you a friendly, informal email. That's different for them. Or vice versa. You may have friends that normally are talking very friendly, and then they send you a very professional email. And it's like, hang on, this is different. Why is this different? We need to stop. We need to think about it and verify. There might be language errors as well. Spelling and grammar errors are very common. Yes, I know we have AI and it's making everything better. They still sometimes purposefully add in spelling and grammar mistakes. And sometimes that's to get past certain phishing filters that are looking for very specific words. So some of those misspellings are actually done on purpose. Another one of the reasons why they might do misspelling of things is they don't want to trick a smart person. If you're a smart person, I know you're going to catch all of my phishing emails. I want to trick a dumb person because dumb people are really easy to trick. So if I put some spelling errors in, a smart person will go, that's spam, report it as spam. A dumb person may not spot it, and then they'll fall victim to it again and again and again. And of course, if the request that is coming through, sometimes with a sense of urgency, if it's abnormal, we need to be talking about it. We need to be verifying. If it really is your boss, you need to verify through other channels. A lot of organizations are using chat instant messaging, Signal, WhatsApp, Slack, Microsoft Teams. Go through one of those authenticated channels to verify. Email is not very strong when it comes to authenticity because of all of the things we've been looking at for spoofing and changing domain names. And of course, you want to look for inconsistent addresses. This still happens. You saw some real examples, tampabay.rr.com. Obviously, that's not apnic.net. Still useful to check on the from addresses and check to see if there are inconsistencies. You do have to be careful. Some legitimate companies will use different domain names, especially if they're tracking packages or tracking clicks on links. So that can make it difficult, but be very careful for it. And if you do happen to click on a link and it gives you a different type of login page, you want to be very suspicious and possibly notify your IT and security teams. For example, APNIC and many other companies uses Okta for central authentication. The only authentication login page for an APNIC staff member is an Okta login page. If it shows up as a Google login page or a Microsoft login page, that's not real. And that is probably a fake link directing you to steal your username and password. So you want to make sure that where you normally log in, if it goes somewhere different, hey, that's a clue for you, especially to stop and get a second opinion. And these types of attacks can be combined, and they commonly are. It's called chaining of attacks. So for example, you can start with a phone call, which is voicemail phishing or voice phishing. The phone call asks you to perform actions that were sent to you in a text message, which is now combining the SMS phishing, or clicking and following a link. This is very common, and it gives it that sense of authority. It's like, I call you up and say, hi, I'm from your bank. We're just, seeing some suspicious activity. We need to verify you're you. But to show you that we are really the bank, I'm going to send you a bank verification code. Now, for the average person, they might go, oh, that sounds legitimate. But I already know your phone number because I'm calling you. So of course I can send you a text message that looks like it's from a bank and get you to read the number back out to me. You've done a form of verification by reading a number back to me. So you feel you've done something to verify me. In reality, I'm just a scammer calling you from a random phone number. So what we have here are some exercises to complete. Now, when's this session go till? I don't want to go too long for this, but I will take a bit of time. So we go to 2:45. Yeah, we've got time for one of these. So what I want you to do, we're not going to go through all of this, but I want you to open this up on your mobile phones or on your laptops. Pick one of these. Doesn't matter which one. This one would be easier to type in, obviously. I don't think I've got any QR codes to bring it up. But what I want you to do is bring it up and have a look at it. These are great training for your friends, your family, and your colleagues in your workplace, where it actually shows you phishing messages. And it asks you to say, is this real or not? And you hover your mouse and you click on email addresses to see what information is hiding underneath. Really interesting things. Both of these don't collect information from you. You don't need to create a username and password to access them. It's freely and openly available and can be great to then share with people that you know to help train them. But yeah. Also, at the beginning of this, I say it doesn't collect information. It asks for a name and email address. You can make it up. It doesn't have to be real. It uses that name and email address to create custom phishing messages to look like they're targeting you. So you can put in whatever name and email address you want, but remember what you're using because they'll then pretend to be sending messages to that account. Because criminals do know your email address and they do know your name. It is public record. You can do a Google search and find this information because it's been in so many data breaches. Every criminal on the face of the planet knows your name and email address. So they can, of course, target you by email scams very easily. So don't go through all of them, but have it up on your phone, maybe during the break or later tonight after dinner or something. Have a look at it, see what's useful. Again, I will be sharing these slides out through the agenda, so you'll be able to grab them and copy the full addresses out to share it out as well. But really useful things and free. Free is good. Now, this is from a larger training session that I do for hands-on things as well. But something that I want you to do as basically like a thought exercise. If you had to create a convincing phishing email, say that you're going to run a phishing campaign to test people at your organization, think about normal emails that your organization sends. Emails from HR, emails from your manager to a wider group. Is there a common greeting? Do they include images? A bit of a background image or a banner image or things like that. What information can you use with your knowledge to create a realistic looking email that in fact has a link that goes off to the wrong website? So think about that. We're not going to go through and type it into a shared doc. This is from a more hands-on session. But it's important to think that if you can go through and use information to create something, other people can as well. It's not sensitive information, what your company logo looks like or what might be shared around. A lot of companies give out gift cards for birthdays and maybe holidays as well. So a company saying, hey, we're giving out gift cards, congratulations on a great half-year effort, or happy birthday or happy late birthday. We forgot to send this out earlier. Now, that could be from a month ago or 2 months ago, who knows? But happy late birthday. It's a good chance that they'd be in there. Another one, especially when it was around COVID, organizations being hit with an email saying the company is doing free vaccinations for everyone. This is a mandatory thing. Click here for more information. Now, there's two aspects to that. One, offering something for free. Two, it is mandatory. Some people go, oh, that's horrible. Why is the company making something mandatory like that? And they click on the link because they're angry and they want to see what's going on. Again, triggering that brain through different things. We also have phishing templates from an organization, canifish.com. These are freely available. So if you ever were needing to go through and do a phishing test of people to see if they would click links, there's plenty of examples here. And again, these are examples for the good guys. There's examples that criminals are using as well to look like real email from Google or Microsoft or any of the other organizations like that. So some things to have in your mind. Are phishing simulation tests a necessary evil? Can I just get a show of hands? Who here in your organization that you work for sends phishing tests out where you have to, make sure that you don't click on a link, and if you do, they send you for training or something like that? Few people. Is that something that is needed? Or is it just a way for people to be annoyed at the IT or security department? They can be useful for training. How do people test themselves if they don't get emails like that? A lot of people, when they go through online training, they watch the video and they click and they drag it to the end and they finish the video. Hey, look, I did my training. I know, I've done the same thing, the mandatory company training where you watch video after video after video. Are they going to retain that information? And if you were to do a phishing test, is there things to consider? Do you do a phishing test every week? Do you do it for all the same people with the same message? I've seen this for some companies where they send everybody the exact same phishing test at the same time. And people lean over and go, hey, have you seen this one? And people are talking, and then suddenly everybody knows it's just a test and they don't go through with it. And of course, is there any topics, if you do a phishing test, is there any topics that would be off limits, such as COVID vaccinations, saying something's mandatory, or saying, hey, we're giving out a $500 bonus to everybody. Congratulations, click here. Of course, everybody's going to click. $500 bonus, why not? So you have to think about that. Some people that have gotten in trouble have done topics about accidents, crashes, Okay, on to the next bit. So email header analysis. When we look at an email message and all you see is the name, that is such a tiny part of all the information that is being sent by that email. I do like this image. I didn't create this one myself, but how email appears to work is that I send an email and it goes directly from my outbox to somebody's inbox, and nothing in between for that. How email actually works, there could be some improvements made to this image, but we'll go through and use it. This is assuming standard mail clients like running Outlook on your desktop. So you have your mail client, you send it through your mail delivery agent, through your company network to the company's mail server. So if it's Outlook, this is now going through Exchange as the outbound mail server. From here, it goes through routers on the internet, might go through a spam and virus checker on the way into the remote mail server. This mail server could be any number of different things, whether it be Google or Microsoft or self-hosted. And then it goes up through fetched by the email client up at the end. Now, if you're dealing with webmail basically condenses the mail client down much closer to the mail server because it's a web interface more or less directly to the mail server. So it's condensed down a little bit. Every step along the way through here and back up the other side is logged. Not only does it log on the server itself, but it adds information onto the email in the headers as it moves through. So by the time that you receive the email on the far side of things, it actually has a log entry of every mail server that it's gone through along the way, including what the mail client was on the originating point of things. This is an example of an email server log. So this is where we're dealing with the SMTP server that's communicating with other SMTP servers. You can see the connections back and forth. You can see message IDs. So this isn't the to address or the from address, but it's a message ID for a domain name. You can see then that you have the communication here where it has a bit of information on who it's from, who it's to, and then that's all that it logs. So it does have some information. It doesn't log the entire email, but it records a bit of that metadata up at the top. And you can see which IP addresses then were contacted from one mail server to another. Email headers are actually part of the email, and it's up at the head end of the email, thus why it's called a header. The headers that we usually see, subject line, from, to, and date. That's 4 examples of the header, but it's a very small part. And the header is very interesting because as more information is added, it's added on top, again, as the head of the email. So it keeps adding messages on top, on top, on top, as it goes from one mail server to another to another. Now, email headers are a lot more complicated to look at than server logs. Server logs are 1 line each. Here we have the header. Now, remember I said it starts and then it adds on top. So here's the date, to, from, and subject. So this, when you create an email, when you write one yourself, that's what you start with. And then when you send it, it goes here from localhost, it goes to the first mail server, to the second mail server, again, and up and up and up until it's received by the final mail server. So this headers that we see here are seen by the receiver or the recipient of the email. Because again, it's gone through many mail servers. When you're sending it, you don't get this. The sender only has this because the sender only has the original copy. As it goes through mail servers, it picks up more logs, and the recipient ends up with the full history of where it went through. 24 years ago, approximately 24 years ago, I was learning and practicing how to read and analyze these and looking for fake lines as well as the real lines and determining what's real and how it went through. It was very painful, and I don't wish anybody to ever have to analyze headers by manual looking at it ever again. To give you a bit of a help here, I've highlighted IP addresses in blue and highlighted the domain resolved to those IP addresses for mail servers in green, as well as the email address in purple as it's gone through. So you can see the IP addresses of where it's gone through from IPv4. Here we're seeing IPv6 addresses being used and IPv6 on the way through all the way up to the top. And for people that are very astute at looking at email servers, 1e100.net is Google, because 1 to the power of 100 is a Google. So Google actually registered that domain name. Yeah, it's a fun bit of trivia. Again, I never want you to ever have to look at headers like that manually. What I want you to use are tools like these. There are many tools out there, and I try and give multiple examples in case one of them ever goes away. These are my personal favorites. You're free to, of course, find and use whichever ones that you want as well. But these tools are free, and what you do is you take your headers, paste them into here, and it will neatly break it down and say, at this time, it went through this server. At this time, it went through this server, and it will show you the path and everything very, very simply and easily. Now, if you don't know how to access email headers, that's where this website comes in handy. This email headers on MX Toolbox is actually a list of every possible email client, whether it be web clients like for Gmail and Web Outlook, even Yahoo, through to desktop clients such as Thunderbird, Outlook, all the previous versions, because everything was a little bit different. You go here, put in what client for email that you're using, and it tells you exactly how to go through and find the email headers for a message. Some of them are easy, some of them are much harder, but email headers can be extracted from almost every email client out there. This can be useful here because, of course, as we work our way backwards to the person who sent it, if you're tracking down phishing or spam, this tells you exactly which mail server that it went through. And if that mail server is allowing of spoofing of domain names, they're the ones that you contact and say, hey, your email server is being abused by criminals for sending out spam and phishing. Access email headers. find an email, could be a personal one, pull out the email headers, paste it into one of these three tools, and see where the path was of the different mail servers. Okay, so best practices for email security. Now, this is, again, email server-side security. So SMTP servers, these are the server-to-server communication that we're having from one email server to another. They should be using start TLS. This is basically where the communication starts unencrypted, plain text. It sends the start TLS, and it negotiates to move up to an encrypted email connection. Communication starts unencrypted, yeah. If both parties agree, then it's upgraded. This is usually optional. Because encryption is optional on so many email clients, an attacker that can be in the middle can actually fake the connection, can forge it, and fake it to be unencrypted for the entire thing. This leads to man-in-the-middle attacks. So you may think that you're sending a secure email, but the server-to-server communication behind it is plain text unencrypted and won't notify you. It won't tell you anything. DNS cache poisoning can change DNS entries, can change the MX records, and you can actually steal all of the mail server connection for anybody to email through. And because it's man in the middle, they don't just have to take the email and keep it, because then you would notice that your email isn't being routed through properly. They can take your email via a spoofed MX record, take a copy, and then pass it on to the real mail server. And you would never know that it went through somebody in the middle. And of course, a little bit more complicated, but BGP hijacking can hijack an entire prefix, an entire, say, /24, and take all the IP addresses for a mail server and a DNS server and a web server, bring it through the attacker's network. They can look at all the unencrypted information in the middle and then pass it back to its real destination. These are not hypothetical. These have been used. Some of the high-profile attacks have been against cryptocurrency exchanges. And what they did is they did hijacking. They stole the traffic and set up a copy of the cryptocurrency website. People logged into the fake website, and they stole the usernames and passwords, passed the traffic through, and then they went in and stole everybody's cryptocurrency. Now, when we get into SMTP encryption, so encryption is good. First off, you have to make sure that similar to a website, you have to have a TLS certificate, like an SSL certificate. You have to make sure it's in date. You have to make sure that you're supporting the latest cryptography protocols and suites, TLS 1.2, TLS 1.3. All that applies on SMTP servers. But once you've set that up, you have to tell people, I'm using encryption and I want you to use encryption, and please only use encryption when you're communicating with me by email. Like, how horrible would it be if you went to your bank's website and the bank decided, oh, I know you tried to do encryption, but I'm going to drop it down to unencrypted HTTP. It's like nobody would accept that, but that's what we're accepting with SMTP at the moment. Now, here we have DANE. DANE stands for DNS-based authentication of named entities. What DANE does is it associates a TLS certificate, your SSL TLS certificate, with a server using something out of band, using DNS. So DNS is different to the SMTP communication. And you put a DNS record in, and you basically say, hey, if you're querying this server by DNS, and then you want to talk to me, we're going to use TLS. Here's the certificate, and if you see something different, then the connection is actually being hijacked in the middle. Now, of course, as with any internet standards, there's more than one to choose from. Besides DANE, we also have MTA STS. These are sort of competing. They work in different ways. They can both be implemented at the same time. You don't have to just choose one. So the Mail Transfer Agent Strict Transport Security, STS, If anybody does a lot of web server security, you may recognize STS from HSTS. HSTS is for forcing encryption on websites. MTA STS is the same thing for mail transfer agents. So MTA STS enables mail providers to declare that you want to use TLS, and of course, if TLS is enforced. This is different to DANE. So in addition to a DNS record, DANE has to publish a policy on a website. So DANE has many moving pieces. You have to have a special DNS record, and you have to have a policy. It's just a file, it's a text file, but you have to have a policy on a web server somewhere within your domain to prove that you own the domain. Requires TLS version 1.2. So if you're running some old mail server that can't support newer cryptography, it might be a problem. And in addition, for the MTA STS, it requires that the certificate is actually properly signed from a CA. A lot of email certificates, email server certificates, are actually self-signed. Because who cares about email? It doesn't matter if errors happen or if things fall back. So there's a lot of self-signed certificates. But a self-signed certificate can't be validated very easily. So indifferent to DANE, what MTA STS does is say you must use a root CA in order to do the signing. Now, of course, it's using DNS for some of this information, so you should be using DNSSEC. Now, that's not email, that's DNS protocols. But of course, DNS by default is also unencrypted. So you don't want to have really good security here that then relies upon something that is unencrypted. So DNSSEC puts cryptography around it. It doesn't give you encryption, but it signs your DNS records so that the DNS can't be altered without people knowing about it. So the list of recommendations that we have here going through, first off, get a valid TLS certificate for your email server. Make sure that your email server is configured for newer cryptography, TLS 1.2 and 1.3. Nobody really should be using anything less than that, which is why we say disable weaker versions. TLS 1.0, old, insecure, shouldn't be used. TLS 1.1, old, insecure, shouldn't be used. 1.2 and 1.3 is the current minimums. Test your TLS configuration to make sure that it's working. On web servers, you can use Qualys. They have SSL test, where you can go, SSL labs, where you can test your web server. There isn't a lot of easy ones for email. There is a tool called testssl.sh. This is actually a shell script. So it's not really a website, it's a shell script, and you can run it. It uses OpenSSL to do the testing. So you need a little bit of Linux knowledge, not much, but a little bit. And you can actually test your SMTP server's TLS configuration. Make sure that all the cipher suites, all the versions, everything is working as you want. Now, once you've got this set up, we then need to start enforcing encryption. If you already are using DNSSEC on your DNS servers, then setting up DANE is easy because DANE requires DNSSEC. If you don't have DNSSEC running, and a lot of people don't, then you're going to go the route of MTA STS. MTA STS is easier if you don't have DNSSEC. It's good if you do, but it's not a mandatory requirement. Now, of course, if you're not using the DNSSEC for MTA STS, it does require that your certificate is signed by a root CA. So when you're going back up to that top, it has to be a proper chain all the way up to the root and intermediate level. And then set up DNSSEC because DNSSEC is important for DNS security. Now, beyond those are just purely about making sure that encryption is working, that your email is not being sent by plain text. The next thing that we look at is DKIM. DKIM is a little bit more common, domain keys identified mail. It's a way of detecting forged or spoofed email addresses from the from address of things. When an email is sent, it's signed with a private key and validated on the receiving side using a DNS record for the public key. Again, this is relying upon DNS, so if you're not using DNSSEC, there is a little bit of a weak point here. It's not the end of the world, but it is a weak point. This, of course, will help prevent email spoofing and phishing of your domain name. It won't prevent phishing coming in, but it prevents your company being used for phishing on the outbound. So very good for all of your staff, very good for all of your customers, your clients, member organizations, and people that you send email out to and have dealings with. Besides DKIM, we have SPF. SPF operates a little bit differently, is a little bit older, and is much more widely adopted. Like the adoption rate for SPF is like 80, 90%, which is awesome. But it's not the only thing. DKIM is still useful. So SPF is a very simple email validation system, and it's verifying the incoming mail came through the correct server. Now, usually that server means that it's tied to the correct domain name, but the correct server could be Google. A lot of companies use Google. A lot of companies use Microsoft Outlook as well. If the only thing you're validating is that it came from the right server, if the criminal attacker is using the same server, then SPF isn't actually going to help very well for that. The way SPF works is that you have a DNS text record and you put in a list of authorized sending hosts. So if you're using Microsoft Outlook and a criminal uses Microsoft Outlook and they go out through the same Microsoft servers, they can spoof your domain name. Again, of course, if you are using this, DNS text records should be signed for integrity using DNSSEC. Again, you don't want to have the weakest link being your unencrypted DNS. The next one is where we sort of put the last two together. So we had DKIM and SPF. Here we have DMARC. DMARC is about reporting and conformance. So DMARC is a validation system to detect when spoofing is going through. It takes SPF and DKIM and extends it further. So SPF and DKIM is meant to stop forged messages from going out. But what if someone does it anyways? This is actually going to tell you when somebody is handling failures and if you are being the subject of a spoof phishing attack using your company domain name. It also does help a little bit in preventing spoofing and phishing attacks, but not so much on the server-to-server communication side of things. So DMARC is added on top of DKIM and SPF. Now, the other thing that we need to look at, now this is a bit older, but is still very real out there on the internet. We have to make sure that our email servers aren't being abused for sending out spam directly, and that's as an open relay. Open relays should have been taken care of 10, 15, 20 years ago, but a lot of people still open up their email servers to accept email from many places that they shouldn't be. Key thing here is that you shouldn't be allowing unauthenticated email submissions. When people are sending email through your organization, they should be authenticating to the mail server to prove that they can send email out. And then, of course, attackers and criminals won't be able to authenticate. Even if they hit your mail server, they won't have the authentication to be able to send email. The other thing that you can do is that you can separate the ports being used for submission and relay, and you can then put in ACLs. The ACLs that we're talking here is that within your network, you know your IP addresses, and you say that the mail server should only accept connections to send mail from your IP addresses. And if it comes from the outside, it needs to be authenticated in, username and password at a minimum. And only allow your mail server to connect out on port 25. You don't want other weird connections to be happening from it. You just want SMTP from one server to another server. Forward confirmed reverse DNS, FC or DNS. This one is a little less known, but can be very useful here. This is known as full circle reverse DNS. So what we have here is that your mail server, of course, has a forward A record DNS, converting mail.domain.com to your IP address. Your mail server also should have reverse DNS for the same domain name. And this is where a lot of people's mail servers get misconfigured, and then a lot of their email gets flagged as spam. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the forward and the reverse matching. Now, this makes it very difficult if you're running one mail server with many different domain names for that mail server. Mails.example.com, mail.domain.com. Which one do you use for the reverse DNS? Because remember, with DNS, the forward DNS of A records, you can have many names pointing to one IP address. But for reverse DNS with a PTR, you can only have one name pointing for that IP address. So of course you have to pick one. So if you're running a mail server for many different organizations, you need to come up with one common domain name for that mail server. You can route other email domains through it, but the DNS record for that mail server must be one address, and the forward and the reverse have to match. If they don't, you are going to get put onto block lists. Also mentioning here that you have to make sure that your hello or LO notification, this is configured in your SMTP server, that this matches, of course, that forward and reverse DNS as well. If it doesn't, you're probably going to get added onto block lists. Yeah, there we go. What we're looking at here is we're looking at damage to individual email accounts. This is both for your work as well as your personal lives. You want to make sure that if you're not using POP or IMAP, disable them. Don't even have the ports open, don't have the accounts allowing it to be connected. If you do everything in a web application for your email and on your mobile phone, you do not need POP and IMAP. Absolutely disable them. You also want to disable forwarding of email outside of the domain, except where specifically needing to be allowed. And this is because a lot of criminals will try and break into your email account, and one thing they'll do is create a forwarder. So any new email that comes into your email account, a copy gets forwarded to the criminal's email address as well. So even after you change your username and password, disable POP and IMAP, if the forwarder is in place, every single email that you receive, the criminal gets a copy of it. Every email, every document, every bit of information, every authentication URL for getting a password, they will receive a copy of it, and they can then reset your passwords on any number of other websites out on the internet. So forwarding of emails outside of your company, like automatic forwarding, is a very, very dangerous thing. And on your personal email accounts as well, yeah, dangerous as well. So yeah, so these are good for end email accounts, personal and work. Other best practices, these are the really easy ones. Regular software updates. We tell people, keep your systems up to date. Do you want to know some of the ones that get forgotten about? DNS servers and SMTP servers. You set them up, you run them, and nobody looks at them. You know, if DNS is working, it's great, it's working. We don't need to touch it. Don't touch the DNS server, you might break it. And very, very quickly, you get out of date, you get vulnerabilities that are introduced. Same thing with SMTP servers. SMTP servers very commonly don't get a lot of attention to make sure that they're kept up to date and configured with the latest required changes. Logging and monitoring, another one that can be forgotten a lot. You have SIEMs and centralized logging. A lot of it is focusing on the computers where people are interacting with, because that's where a lot of malicious software and viruses are coming through, ransomware and stuff. So you want a good logging to catch that. Logging on your mail server. and logging on your DNS server while we're at it as well. This helps to detect the suspicious activities, detect people that are probing your mail server, trying to send spam out through it, or sending phishing and CEO business email compromise. Monitoring for new email address forwarding rules. If you can't completely disable email forwarding, like automatic forwarding, have an alert for when a user in your organization creates a new forwarding rule and find out, is this okay? Is this normal? Or is it a sign of a criminal that's broken into their email account? And last but not least, after all of the technical side of things, employee training and awareness. Technical is only one layer. And as we see, things fall out of date, new vulnerabilities are discovered, and technical can have issues over time, which is why we need to layer technical controls with non-technical controls. Human awareness and a human firewall where they can look at email messages and say, hang on, this is strange. I'm not going to click on this link, even though the email filter didn't block it on the way in. Regular training sessions, recognizing phishing attempts. You don't have to run a whole phishing campaign, but even a thing of like sharing a picture of the latest phishing that came in to let people know, hey, if you see an email like this, be aware, this is a recent attacker that's trying to send phishing emails into this organization. You also don't want to allow applications to be abused to send spam. If you've got any web forms, you want to make sure that it's hard-coded for which email it's being sent to. Otherwise, people can change a web form and send spam out through that. Sending secure web forms with CAPTCHAs to reduce the number of emails being sent out from it. Validate email addresses if you're running a mailing list or subscribing people onto a mailing list. Validate the addresses before you add them onto the list. So many mailing lists, you just submit an email and suddenly you're magically on the mailing list, which means if I take all of your email, I can sign you up to all of these mailing lists that you never asked for. That shouldn't be possible. There should always be a verification before adding people onto a mailing list. And of course, if you are sending out email through a mailing list, make sure you have an unsubscribe link. If you don't have unsubscribe, it's a fast way that people start adding you onto spam block lists, and then all of your email going out is going to end up being blocked and not be receiving by the recipients. If you do end up with email on a block list, I've only got 2 more slides left. If you do end up with your email on a block list, you need to go through and figure out what's going wrong. If other people are on the block list, it might be from your inbound server or outbound server. Common causes, if you've been sending spam, you're going to get on a block list. If you've been sending spam to trap email addresses, these are email addresses that should never receive any email, but sometimes they'll get picked up. You send an email to spam trap, you're instantly on a block list. If you allow email spoofing, you're going to get onto a block list. And if you don't configure your mail server with the reverse DNS properly, you're going to get added onto a block list. To check block lists, there's a few different websites that you can do. This has a real-time block list check, RBL check. You can also check aggregator sites. If you go to any of these, it will check against all the different, there's like 20 or 30 different spam block lists out there. This will check against all of them to make sure that your email is green with a tick. So these are very useful tools to check. If you are listed on a block list, even just one of them, you need to investigate why you're on there. They usually will tell you, but you have to click through, you have to read the information and figure out why they added you to that block list so that you can fix the problem and get off the block list. Otherwise, your email will not go through. And this is just an exercise. This is for you to do at home. Again, this is a slide deck from a longer hands-on exercise. But the idea here is that you use some of these block list checking websites here. And I've got some IP addresses that I want you to put into those websites and see if they're on a block list and figure out why that they're on a block list. Sometimes an entire network will get added to a block list, like a whole /24, sometimes larger, /20, /19. If a lot of spam is coming from different addresses on a network, the whole network is going to get added onto a block list. And if that happens, and you're just one IP address on this network, there's no way that you're going to get off the block list, unfortunately. So yeah, so there you go. Go through, find your MX records, do some lookups using dig or NSLOOKUP, verify your IP addresses, and see if there's any problems. So there we go. Sorry for a few minutes over. I'm sorry for anybody on Zoom that things dropped off and came back, but thank you for hanging with us. We do have a 15-minute coffee break, I think it is now. And then after the 15-minute coffee break, we will go through the remaining, where'd it go? We will go through the other sessions. So that was email security. The next highest voted one was DDoS attack prevention. So 15-minute coffee break. And when we come back, I'll go through DDoS attack prevention as the second highest voted by you for this session. Thanks, everyone.